latest that we've gotten there on the scene at the Pentagon is that the Pentagon is telling people and reporting to the press that they don't expect any more survivors to be pulled from the rubble there. You're seeing in our live picture the work that goes on there at that scene. We just checked with our Bob Frank, and it was saying that they believe that they have found some places where there may be bodies, and they will be getting them after they get more control over that fire that is still continuing to burn. But the victims that were pulled out of there and that were able to walk away from that location there are at Arlington Hospital, which is where our medical news correspondent Rhea Blanky is right now. Let's check in with her to get the latest from there. Rhea?
Yeah, Leon, more than any other hospital in the United States, the Virginia Hospital Center at Arlington is the one that should be most prepared for a terrorist attack because of its close proximity to the Pentagon. This hospital's metal was tested yesterday when during a 3-hour period, make that a 2-hour period, some 30 patients were brought here with various contusions, burns, broken bones. The staff here was on an orange alert at that time, and there was nowhere near any level of great concern because of this hospital's preparation. Periodically, they do actually go through a number of procedures to make sure that they have all their procedures in line. In fact, some of the administrators who were involved in the emergency services yesterday mentioned that they had seen the plane crashes into the 2 World Trade Tower towers, and that they indicated, you know, what would happen if something like that occurred here just moments before the plane crashed into the Pentagon. They went back through their materials, and within 10 minutes, they got the call that, in fact, we've had an attack. We need to make sure that we have everything up to speed. We want to make sure and show you some pictures of some of the people who arrived yesterday. As I mentioned, during that 2-hour period, 30 patients, but overall, some 44 patients treated here at Virginia Hospital Center. Many of those people have been released, 26 of those people discharged, but some 17 were admitted. Of those 17, 9 of those people went to ICU. 2 of them listed in serious condition, 7 of them in critical condition. Some of the others are now stable at this time, and one of the people was transferred because they're military personnel to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. There are a couple of other hospitals in the area, including the Washington Hospital Center, which is the only major hospital center here that has an adult burn center. They took more of the serious injuries at the Washington Hospital Center. There are some 12 patients there now, 7 of those patients listed as critical with severe burns. At Walter Reed, we mentioned there's one transfer from here, but also 2 other patients, military personnel. And it's anticipated that some of the other patients who have come to this facility and others around the area will also go to Walter Reed as they stabilize, if in fact they are military personnel. And one other hospital in the region, Inova Alexandria Hospital, took in 14 patients as a result of the attack on the Pentagon. It's been a very challenging time for this hospital, but again, they feel that they've stood up extremely well. In fact, their Code Orange alert, which is their highest status of alert, in which they call in all the staff members and get as much help as they can, is now canceled. They suspect, it's not very likely, they will receive more patients from the rescue and recovery operations, even though they want to keep hope alive. They certainly don't anticipate that they will see large numbers, the waves of patients that they saw yesterday. Leon?
Rhea, quickly, if you can tell me, are you hearing any word about there being blood shortages there, as we were hearing in other places like up in New York?
We did hear yesterday that Inova Alexandria Hospital was having some problems with blood shortages. We are not hearing that today. In fact, we checked with Washington Hospital Center, and they too seem to be having good blood supplies. However, we don't want to discourage people from donating, but we don't understand that it's necessarily a problem at this point.
All right, well, that's good news. Rhea Blanky reporting live for us this morning from Arlington Hospital. Darren?
The story, of course, affecting not just here in the U.S., but all around the world. And in fact, as we understand it, a quarter of U.S. embassies around the world are still closed today. For more on that, let's go to the State Department and our Andrea Koppel. Andrea.
Darren, this is really the other half of the story. While the search and rescue is going on here in the United States, the diplomats in this building, including the top U.S. diplomat, Secretary of State Colin Powell, sent out orders yesterday for all embassies to review their security procedures. And as you mentioned, the final tally as things stand right now is that more than 50 out of more than 260 U.S. embassies and consulates around the world have now temporarily closed their doors. And we're told that all of the embassies in both the Middle East, on the Arabian Peninsula, and in North Africa have closed. Now, they say that this was done really as a precautionary measure. They have no real specific or credible threats to these embassies, but they'd rather be safe than sorry. Now, while the embassies are closed, there is another effort that's underway. In the words of one State Department official, Darren, it's really a message of, are you with us or are you against us? That's the message Secretary Powell is sending out as he speaks with leaders around the world, trying to rally the international community to the United States side. That's not a difficult effort right now, as we've heard calls coming in from around the world expressing support for the United States. And as we've already reported, right now at the NATO headquarters in Belgium, in Brussels, ambassadors there from all 19 NATO member states are right now reviewing a draft which would give the United States upfront support if and when it makes the decision that it knows who was behind yesterday's attacks, that all of NATO's military capability would be at the ready should the United States need it. So right now what you're seeing is an intense diplomatic effort both within NATO, the United Nations, the European Union, with the Russians, with the Pakistanis. We understand Secretary Powell also spoke with people in that country. Why is that significant? Because they're the neighbors and supporters of the Taliban militia in Afghanistan. Darren, so right now as things stand, we have more than 50 U.S. embassies that are closed and intense diplomatic efforts underway.
Yeah, and on
Darren?
that point, Andrea, I want to get this quick, but I think important question in here. I imagine there are a lot of Americans traveling overseas who are following the story, are perhaps scared. If they're in a country where the U.S. embassy is closed, who are they to contact if they're in trouble and need information?
That's a very good question. If there are emergency needs that any U.S. citizens might have, we're told that they can still contact the embassy. What it means is that the embassy isn't open for business for things like visas and whatnot. But if an American citizen should have need for information or any advice, things of that nature, they can call their U.S. embassy or consulate as they would do under any circumstance.
Very good point, and clarifying exactly what closed means in terms of an embassy and business. Andrea Koppel at the State Department, thank you. Paula, back up to you in New York.
All right, Darren, I want to share some new pictures with our audience out there of what Ground Zero looked like yesterday, shortly after the impact of the multiple terrorist attacks here, when two hijacked planes slammed into two separate World Trade Center towers 18 minutes apart. A lot of the people who evacuated the North Tower, which was the first tower hit, describe it taking 45 minutes to get out of the building. So in fact, the second jet had hit the South Tower at the time they were being evacuated. They didn't even know what was going on above them. This looks relatively calm as you look at these pictures, but folks who are being evacuated from these buildings describe something different. Some people in a state of panic, some people screaming, and those diligently following the instructions of the law enforcement agents. The one thing you also need to understand, this picture obviously was taken after both towers had collapsed, which had happened in sort of the 10 o'clock hour of this broadcast. The one striking thing about the city today is that at least to me, as someone who's lived here a long time, eerie. It is unbelievably quiet. There's a good reason for that. Most companies advise their employees not to go to work today. All the public schools are closed, the private schools, the parochial schools. The major stock markets are closed today. As you just heard Darren and Leon say, no flights are expected to resume today, at least not at noon today, as was originally expected. And right now I want to go to a piece that Maria Hinojosa filed to give you an idea of just how strange it is out there, particularly for those of us who are used to a city that's full of vitality. Let's go.
Midtown Manhattan, the heart of New York City. Usually abuzz, today quiet. An awful quiet.
This is what downtown looks like where I come from.
A quiet that stretched all the way from the foot of Manhattan through what should be bustling streets.
Normally you just pass and go about your daily work, but now you stop to say hello, how are you?
A quiet at the Port Authority, where hundreds of commuters should be gathering. Quiet too at Penn Station, where a flood of travelers is supposed to emerge, today a trickle.
Usually it's elbow to elbow, trying to run and get the train and just get to your job.
And outside on the street, the Madison Square Garden marquee, black.
This is the M104 to the United Nations.
It's hard to believe that in the middle of a Wednesday morning, in the middle of 6th Avenue, in the heart of Greenwich Village in Manhattan, that there's no traffic, nothing behind me, nothing coming from in front of me, standing in the middle of 6th Avenue. It's the eeriest of feelings.
People jousting around, running around, bumping into people, not caring about anything, because we're in such a great free society. And now we have to be careful of what we may do. People look at people apprehensively. So it's a different feeling altogether.
Businesses were closed except to help rescue workers. So were bridges and tunnels. Even the pet shop was closed.
Not up there. Not up there.
Usually trucks roll by at 5:30 in the morning in front of our home, and it wakes us up, and you kind of, and today there was nothing. It was so strange. I actually want the noise back.
Instead of work, the sign said that people should give blood or pray. And missing from the sky, that signature view of downtown Manhattan, the Twin Towers used to poke into the sky. Now there's just space. A lot of things missing in New York today. That New York attitude, gone for now. Maria Hinojosa, CNN, New York.
And I must say to Paul, up there in New York, even from our perspective here in Atlanta, for many of those of us who have visited New York so many times, that is eerie to see a city that quiet and that somber. Well, let's talk now about the investigation into finding out exactly who is responsible for this. Officials are saying that early investigation into these deadly attacks point to Islamic extremist and alleged terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden. Our national correspondent Mike Betcher is joining us here on the set. He's got the latest for us on the investigation, and you've been checking out things. And I want to ask you, first of all, in looking at what you've heard and seen so far and talking to those you have, has anyone said to you that they think that the 4 attacks that happened yesterday were the only 4 that were planned? Because that, to me, would seem sort of strange to think that any group that could be so efficient that they would have 100% effectiveness or efficiency here.
Well, I was told by one source that they wanted to ensure, they're speculating now, but that these groups obviously wanted to ensure that they were successful. In other attempts that have occurred, usually a quarter or a half or sometimes none of the efforts work. But there was a concern, is this over? And no one can answer that question yet.
All right, well, how close now are they getting to actually identifying who they think they're going to be going after here?
Well, in the United States, the search is centering on 3 fronts. First, that car that was seized at Logan International Airport in Boston. Inside the car were flight training manuals. They're looking at that car. We've confirmed independently that indeed there are interesting items inside of that car that FBI agents want to look at. Also, another car was seized at Daytona Airport. In that car, again, there were items in Arabic apparently relating to Osama bin Laden, and that is the reason they are looking at that car. It has been towed away and is being looked at. And at a second location in Florida, in Venice, a couple there has been questioned by the FBI. They run a flight school, and they say that the FBI indicated to them that maybe 2 of their former students a year ago may have had something to do with the attacks yesterday, Leon.
Let me ask you about the material you said that was found in Boston, because our Bill Delaney was on about maybe an hour and a half or so ago, and he was saying that there was some concern that that information may actually be false information floating out there, because they would find it, because the experts he talked to found it so hard to believe that you would find something left behind that would be an Arabic flight training manual. Is something as specific as that being left behind in the wake of this?
Well, let me give you an example. The Daytona car may provide some answers to that. Maybe these people wanted those cars to be found, because we have indications in the Daytona car that information was left very obvious relating to Osama bin Laden, that it was left out there for people to see. So, you know, you can speculate all you want about this, and it's difficult to know. The agents, the intelligence analysts themselves are really wrestling with this issue, and to second-guess a terrorist is a difficult thing to do.
All right, what about the overseas cooperation that we've been hearing about so much lately? That the U.S. is going to be seeking it from other states, other entities overseas. And we've heard also that many folks in the intelligence community are concerned that there is no human intelligence, at least not like there used to be. The U.S. doesn't have as many people on the ground in different places. Any concern that that fact alone will prevent them from finding out exactly who is responsible?
No, they do not think it will prevent them from finding out who is responsible for